think is comfortable with giving some initial information about that. So at this point, I'll just turn it over to Dr. Rasnick. Thank you very much, Dr. Rasnick.
Thanks, Jim. So this is a really exciting day for us. Around 8 o'clock this morning, we received our initial shipment of the Pfizer coronavirus vaccine, and we're currently implementing steps to start our initial vaccines later on this afternoon. And this is a vaccine product that we think has a tremendous potential in the short term to protect our staff, and in the longer term to really drive coronavirus rates down in the community. And so we're looking forward to begin the phases of deploying this vaccine here. We have a lot of confidence in the safety of this vaccine. I personally was a participant in the Pfizer COVID vaccine trial. I received my initial injection back in the summertime with a follow-up dose early fall. And as part of that vaccine campaign, I've been reading every article that's published since, and just found out yesterday afternoon that I had indeed received the active drug as part of the trial. And, you know, having gone through it as a trial participant and then as a physician reading the study results, I've got two good lenses on how this actually happened. I felt, you know, well supported as a trial participant.
Doctor, I'm sorry, you went on mute for some reason by accident there.
Nope, sorry. Am I back now? So as we roll this out, there are some things we have to monitor for. Like with any vaccine, this one has side effects. We're going to have people with fevers. We're going to have people with chills and aches, feel tired for a day or two. I had those exact symptoms after my booster dose, and they lasted for about half a day, got better with some ibuprofen, and I was back to my normal activities. That's basically a sign that your immune system is responding well to the stimulus that it's given, and it's developing an immune response. And so to my mind, as a physician, that's a good thing that my immune system had detected something and responded to it. And now that we see the results of the trial, we know that was an effective immune response. It has been 95% effective at preventing coronavirus disease in trial participants. And that's really amazing for a vaccine to be that effective. Anytime we use a medication, anytime we use anything in medical treatment, there are allergic reactions we have to be vigilant for. And there are some sporadic reports that you've seen of anaphylaxis, you know, the more severe allergic reactions. And we have implemented safety procedures in place in case anything like that happens. And we've had some very clear guidance from the state about people with a history of anaphylaxis to vaccines seem to be the ones that are more likely to get anaphylaxis to this. They still support offering the vaccine to people that have had histories of anaphylaxis, just because the overall benefit for those individuals in the setting of this pandemic would still be positive. We just need to have the ability to watch people longer and to be ready to respond with appropriate medications if we see that. And so we've already implemented that as part of our vaccine planning here. So we're really looking forward to getting started.
Sir, if you've got a moment for a question, I think some of us have seen some of the news about some of the allergic reactions that we've seen sporadically. Anaphylaxis is one of them. What does that mean? And to the average person who hears that, it sounds pretty scary. What is it? How common is it? And how can you treat it if it happens?
So anaphylaxis is fairly uncommon, but the one that you're probably most familiar with that you hear about are people with severe peanut allergies, where if they, you know, will get exposed to peanuts or, you know, even dust from peanuts, their windpipe can constrict, they can have difficulty breathing, their blood pressure can fall, and if not appropriately treated with a medication called epinephrine, that reaction can be pretty severe. And so these are the folks that have to carry around the EpiPens with them to administer antidotes if they get exposed to peanuts. Also people that have bee sting allergies, that's typically anaphylaxis is what that manifests as. And so again, it's just difficulty breathing and a very significant fall in your blood pressure, because a small number of people are just primed to dump a lot of histamine into their bloodstream when they're exposed to certain things. And it's rare, but it can be severe if not caught early and treated. If you treat people early with epinephrine, you can turn that around very quickly. You just have to recognize it and respond quickly.
And talk us through the protocols you guys have in place in case that happens with some of the shots you're giving out today and in the coming days.
So there's a recommended supply of medications that has been recommended by CDC, and we've positioned that in close proximity to our vaccination sites so that we have those response medications readily available. We're planning on observing anyone that gets the vaccine and they have a history of severe allergies in that environment for 30 minutes is what's recommended by the CDC. And we've also notified our emergency response teams in-house. We have continuously on-call teams of physicians and nurses that respond to any sort of emergency that crops up in the hospital. And we've kind of given them instructions to be prepared for any calls to our vaccination center so they can immediately respond. And being that this is in a hospital and those teams are readily available, we can get those folks to the vaccine center very quickly.
I mean, it's quite a process, Dr. Rasnick, to get this vaccine to wherever it needs to be. Can you give us an idea of where it came from? Did it start in Michigan, and kind of the process we see in that video, from start to finish for you today?
Sure. So it kind of started, we got a shipping notice yesterday that it was on its way. We kind of had continual tracking updates that sort of gave us by 10:30 a.m. It's kind of your typical thing you would get for an Amazon package, basically. But as it arrived, we sort of got more specific details, and it showed up at around 8 o'clock this morning. And they're very careful. They ship this vaccine packed in dry ice. It has very sophisticated temperature monitoring equipment in the package, and it communicates constantly with Pfizer. So they know the entire time from when it leaves their warehouse until it shows up at our doorstep and goes into our freezer that it stayed at the appropriate storage temperature and that the product was in good quality when it arrived.
What happens now that it's
How
arrived?
important? Oh,
What happens now is we have a schedule that we continue to build. We didn't really know for sure until about a week ago that we would be getting vaccine, and we didn't really know until a couple of days ago exactly what day it would arrive. And so we've had to be very nimble with our planning. And so now we're in the process of scheduling numerous staff members to gain access to this vaccine. And we're starting with our highest risk individuals that are working on our COVID units that have the greatest amount of exposure, giving them the opportunity to sign up first. And then we're continuing to include more members of our staff as we kind of pass through those higher priority phases. And we're using guidance from the Tennessee Department of Health to kind of help triage those that have the greatest risk of exposure and moving down the list to people that are still at risk, but the other ones sort of have more risk.
how important is the time for this when you're scheduling, folks that are going to get vaccinated? I know that, we've seen research that there's a timeline for when you open a vial for room temperature. Can you talk about how that goes into the way you schedule things?
Correct. So once we have the vaccine thawed and diluted, we only have a matter of hours to days, depending on what steps we take in that process. Like once it's in a syringe, we only have a couple hours to use it. Once it's diluted in a vial, we have to use that vial in a certain frame of time. And once it's even thawed and not diluted, we only have like 6 days in our refrigerator. So we have to be careful looking at our schedule, knowing how many people we have coming in over the follow-up days, only bring out enough vials to cover those initially. And then as we go through this process, we'll kind of in a batch thaw out the vials that we need. If we need more, it only takes about a half an hour to thaw a vial and start using it. So that's why we're going to be able to get started with some today. So just, over the next couple of weeks, our goal is to have everyone vaccinated with our first supply, to have used all of our supply by the end of the year. That's our target.
How much have you gotten?
So we've been asked by the state to not go into specifics about the exact quantity of vaccine. However, I can say that we have enough to cover most of our highest risk team members as we roll out this vaccine. We don't have enough to cover everyone. There are going to be some of our staff that will have to wait until future allocations of the vaccine are delivered, but I'm confident with our supply that we'll get our highest risk team members.
And obviously this requires 2 shots. So you get one kind of load of them now. Are you holding on to half of those to give second doses to folks, or are you expecting another shipment in 3 weeks, I guess, to have
Correct.
these folks come back in?
In 3 weeks, we will get a shipment of exactly the same quantity we received today to provide the booster doses. And so we're not holding anything back. We're going to use all of our allotment in the next 2 weeks.
And as far as, we talk about, this has been called a historic day. Can you just give us an idea for those who see this of what this actually means? Not the technical science stuff, but we're getting frontline healthcare workers vaccinated.
Yeah, so what this means for us is the risk that people have been putting themselves at on our coronavirus units, being face to face, being in the room for hours at a time, especially our nursing staff that really are there more than anyone else in those rooms. We have personal protective equipment, we have masks, we have gowns, we use hand hygiene, and that's done a really good job of protecting us. But that stuff is prone to slip ups. You can make a mistake putting your mask on. You can accidentally rub your eye. There are just so many ways it can slip up. And then when you're outside of the hospital, we've seen so many of our vital team members get exposed to COVID just in the community, from family members, from being out in public. And when we have staff that are missing because they're sick at a time when we have such a high volume of patients in the hospital, we can't really afford to have anyone sidelined, even if they're out for 10 days with mild illness. We need everyone here. So having this vaccine, think of that as protection you wear everywhere. It's, you have to take your mask off to eat, you have to take your mask off to shower, to, exercise and stuff like that. You just can't wear it 24 hours a day. Once you have immunity from a vaccine, you basically wear that 24 hours a day. And so it gives, not just at work, it keeps our vital team members here and present, taking care of members of our community without worrying as much about getting sick with COVID.
And for the average person, when will they be able to be vaccinated, and how vigilant should they be after they get that vaccination?
So people that aren't in the hospital, people that don't work in hospitals, people that aren't nursing home residents, there should start to be some initial vaccine supplies available to people in the community, maybe February, March, where those vaccines will be allocated. And I believe it's going to be okay for people that don't have anaphylaxis history or anything else to be able to go to just a routine community pharmacy and get that vaccine. And as I understand it, that's the deployment plan at present for people that will need to get vaccinated just for their general protection. And they're going to be asking people from the highest risk groups to go first, people over 65, people with comorbidities, people that have diabetes, kidney disease, hypertension, heart disease. That's going to be a very big challenge to monitor. And I think everyone that's planning on this vaccine rollout right now is focusing on getting the healthcare workers and the nursing home population covered at first. The vaccine planners at the state and public health are going to have to really give some careful thought on how they coordinate that rollout to the community. We don't anticipate we will be offering vaccine to patients here at the medical center for a while. It'll take us a while to get all of our staff covered. I suspect there will be opportunities for the public at large to get vaccinated through retail chain pharmacies as part of the national campaign, but those details are still not finalized to the extent that I've heard them.
You mentioned nursing homes. Do you know the schedule for when those vaccines will roll out to nursing homes?
I do not. I've been completely focused on plans for the medical center here. I know that I believe they're targeting the next vaccine, the Moderna vaccine that has anticipated approval imminently. I would imagine it will start shipping next week if things go according to plan. And the state has decided that each county is going to get an allocation of that vaccine to their health departments. And so if everything goes by the same timeline Pfizer went, it should start showing up at health departments sometime next week. And I believe it is their responsibility or their charge to deploy that vaccine. But those specifics, I've been so focused on the medical center's plans that I haven't paid too much attention to the Moderna rollout plans.
You've been in this for 9 months now. How do you feel watching this box arrive with this, life-saving vaccine show up to your hospital today? What was that feeling like?
It was an extremely emotional moment. All of us that have been part of the core team were invited to go join our team members in the pharmacy and see that box arrive. And it's the best Christmas present you can get. It's really hope for people here at the hospital that they can continue to do their job effectively. And then just on the bigger picture, and even though it's going to take time, this is hope that we're going to turn this pandemic around and get back to life as normal. So it was huge.
What would you say to people who are watching this, who are watching the vaccine rollout and who are still hesitant, who say, gosh, it happened fast, I don't know, I'm a little worried about this? What would you say to people who still have concerns?
Reach out to your trusted sources, reach out to your physician, reach out to your friends that might work in healthcare that are getting this vaccine, talk to them about their experiences. I'm, sharing my story with people here at the hospital about being in the trial and, being part of that just to try to share to them that, this was a clinical trial. I didn't feel rushed. I didn't feel pressured. I felt well supported as a participant. It went through all of the safety checks. It's just amazing how well they were able to coordinate doing everything you would need to do for a vaccine trial simultaneously, efficiently, no waste. It was just amazing how this was operated. But it's understandable that people are hesitant. Anything that comes out this quickly, completely understand the hesitancy. I just encourage people to be a little skeptical of kind of exaggerated claims that you might see on social media, things that you might not have heard from CDC or your physician or heard us talking about as reasonable side effects of this vaccine. Verify things that you see online, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and you need to get your information on the vaccine from trusted sources and be open to kind of considering this for your health when it becomes available for your group, because I find this extremely important for us to get widespread uptake in our community to help finally get us back to normal.
You mentioned frontline workers are the first at UT to get it. Can you just speak more to the prioritization that UT is taking? Who's determining that? And do you have a timeline as to when hopefully everyone in the hospital can be vaccinated?
Sure. So we started about 2 months ago when it started to look like a vaccine was going to show up, developing our internal priority list. And we had a multidisciplinary group. We had nurses, technicians, pharmacists, physicians, a wide variety of people met together to have discussions, frankly and openly, about who had the greatest risk. And so our initial vaccines aren't just going to doctors and nurses. They're going to our housekeeping and environmental services folks, our food services folks that go into COVID patient rooms. We're being very inclusive, not by work role per se, but how much exposure do you have to COVID when you work here? And so there are some people that are going to wait that, have COVID risk, and they may have, reasons to expect to do it, but we're really making an effort for the people that are primarily focusing their work on COVID to go first. And then we know, based on what we've observed here, where COVID patients tend to show up. There are some COVID units that occasionally get a patient that we weren't expecting. We're getting that group next. And then we're gradually expanding our ring until everyone that has the highest risk is included. We move to the next lowest stage of risk. We're considering things like the age of our team members, whether they have medical comorbidities. When we start to run low, we're going to make sure that if we haven't gotten through the next priority group of people, we're going to make an effort to get as many of the highest risk team members included as possible so that we can fairly and equitably do this. So there's no single individual making these decisions. We started again 2 months ago before we even knew a vaccine would work, knowing that when the time came, if we hadn't thought about this in advance, we would have a lot of challenges on our hands.
We get a lot of questions about that efficacy rate, 95% versus 70 versus 80, these numbers that have come out. For the general public, as we report on Moderna's here in the next few weeks, AstraZeneca's, Johnson & Johnson's, are those numbers important to keep in mind? How much weight should we give them?
So any protection above 30% was what is set as a criteria by the FDA to approve a vaccine. And 30% is about what we get from an influenza vaccine on a bad year, and 50% is what we get on a good year. And so 30 to 50 is kind of what we're used to working with. And we know that the flu vaccine saves numerous lives and protects from a lot of illness and protects from a lot of hospitalizations, even with protection rates that low. 95% is incredible. There's only a handful of vaccines we use that are that effective. Hepatitis B vaccine, hepatitis A vaccine, measles vaccine, those are some of the ones that are in the 90+% effective range. Just tremendously beneficial. No one really expected it would be that high. We had hoped it would be good, but 95 was great. Now, what I would say is, as different products come online, you might hear about something with 70% efficacy or 50% efficacy. My advice to people that get offered that is I wouldn't decline those vaccines. If something comes online and your priority group comes up and that's the one that's available, I would take an approved vaccine with 70% if those supplies of the 95% are limited. Or there might be things about those 95% vaccines that maybe people are allergic to components of those vaccines and they need to move to an alternate that has a different technology. Maybe people want to wait until vaccines are available that have technology they're familiar with, like the inactivated virus vaccines that are still several months away. That's the same technology as flu vaccine. And there may be people that just want to wait that long if it gets them to take any coronavirus vaccine and they want to wait for that, I wouldn't recommend it if their number's up and another product's available. But if that gives them confidence and they get vaccinated anyway, that may be an approach that people take. And so we won't really know for a while what the other vaccine efficacy levels are for the other products. I hope they all are 95%, but inevitably some are going to be lower. And whatever you can get access to when the time comes, you know, if it's in that 50 to 70% range, I still think taking advantage of that product would be a thing to do.
Those are all the questions I have, sir. If anybody else does, obviously chime in, but thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Looking forward to getting this started today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Asnick. I'm good too.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in about an hour.